let's bring in former U.S. Ambassador to China, Max Baucus. And Ambassador, what's your reaction of these hard asks by the Chinese president heading into this meeting?
I'm not surprised. The Chinese are very tough. They're very firm. I think that since they pulled back the Chinese a bit from earlier negotiations, they've now hardened more. My friends in China tell me that China is also hardening in the sense that nationalism is getting higher all the time. China feels like it's in a pretty strong position, even though the economy is down a little bit. They think history's at their back. There's a bounce in their step. I'm not surprised at all. I also expect, however, that President Xi will extend a bit of an olive branch, saying that he'd like to work with the United States with respect to North Korea and Iran, because we have to work together, which is the real bottom line here. Both our countries have to work together. President Xi understands that. I think President Trump understands that. There's a lot of trade, a lot of investment, because really the more these tariffs go into effect, the more it's going to hurt not only China, but also the United States.
Ambassador, thank you for being with us. It's Jonathan Herning. I want to ask you about Huawei. The jury seems to be mixed on this one. Some countries like the U.S. have banned Huawei products. Other countries like Italy and Brazil have not banned it. How much of this is a security threat to Americans, and how much of it, if you will, sir, is a pissing match between two leaders of two very prominent countries?
Well, it's hard to say, because so far the United States has not shown proof of actual Huawei spying that's compromised the United States. There's a fear there that Huawei will be in that position, but there's no proof. It's very unfortunate that we're falling into a bipolar world where China develops its own 5G, the United States develops its own 5G, and if the more that happens, the more we're going to fall into an abyss here, and nobody comes out a winner. In fact, long term, I think it'll hurt the United States, because we're rules-based, we Americans. The Chinese are less rules-based. They're more results-based, and they'll find ways to cut deals with their 5G all around the world, and even try to cut deals with the Europeans. It's a big, serious issue, and it behooves the United States government, frankly, to show some proof, and also figure out some ways where we are not in this big gulf between China's sphere of influence on the one hand on technology and the U.S. on the other. We have to find ways to work together.
Ambassador, again, thank you for joining us this evening. Another question, you mentioned North Korea as a possible pivot from the conversation, that President Xi might try to arrange himself as the intermediary there, as he has done before. But it seems to me that President Trump really is putting the economy first. And I think looking toward our election, that will be a much more important issue for his campaign than what is going on in North Korea. Do you think President Xi might be underestimating that, the importance of the economy and the importance of winning, if you will, from the point of view of Donald Trump on this trade issue?
I think that President Trump, don't forget, would like to, if he can, get some resolution in North Korea. Don't forget, a while back, there was some talk about President Trump trying to get a Nobel Prize for his work on North Korea. The thing here is that there will be no solution on the Korean Peninsula without the involvement of China. China will not allow a solution that results in against Chinese interests. So it's important for China to signal to President Trump and to South and North Korea that China's there. I don't expect there to be much negotiation over in Osaka. That's true. But I still think it's important because President Xi wants this for the United States to know that China is there, China's watching, and China's very much going to be part of the solution at some point.
Ambassador, it's Zachary Karabell. Just wondering, from your contacts, there's a lot of talk in the United States about whether or not U.S. companies, Apple included, will try to diversify their supply chains and rely less on either producing in China or selling into the domestic Chinese market. How effective do you think the Chinese are right now at diversifying their own global economic relationships? There's a lot of talk about a Chinese and Beijing charm offensive to other countries to kind of, in its own way, isolate the United States. How effective is that? Do you think it will continue?
I have a lot of respect for the Chinese, their industry, their hard work, their determination, and they're a large country, and they think history is at their back. They're going to double down on developing their own semiconductor industry. They're going to double down and developing technologies that they think are important to them in the future, and they'll work with other countries. There's no question about that. I go back to an earlier point, though, that we as a country have to recognize China's rise. We have to respect China because China's not going away.
Well,
at the same time, we have to be very strong internally. We've got to work with our allies so that we are strong in the best sense of the term, so China respects us.
Right.
And
well,
then we can start talking in a mutually respectful way.
China's rise, but then a lot of people are afraid of this new frontier as well.